Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Just some quick reviews of GoToWebinar features, so you have them at the ready when we're going through this webinar. One, if you happen to have a slow internet connection and need to switch over to a telephone connection, a regular conference call, you have that option. You can expand the audio section in your GoToWebinar control panel and just change the radio button over to telephone. And you will see instructions and you'll see the number to call and the PIN number to hit, etc., in order to connect via telephone. If you can hear me just fine over mic and speakers, that's fine. Any questions will be answered or posted via text, so no need for voice chat. We'll just be doing a silent webinar today. As for the questions, you'll notice that there is a section below the audio section you can expand. It says questions. If you can't see it, you'll probably see the bar. You can also click that little pop-out button on the far right corner of the questions bar. That will pop it out of the control panel and have it handy and available for you through the presentation up top if you need it. Anyways, you can type in your questions there, and they will be answered near the end of the webinar after we've gone through everything. If we take a pause when I'm looking at it, I will try and keep an eye on some of those questions and maybe possibly answer some of those, but we will definitely get to any posted questions at the end of the webinar. Okay. With that said, we are going to pause for just a second and then we will begin. All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Armando Wershen, and I'll be your host today for this webinar for a slightly deeper dive into the Oracle Management Cloud application performance monitoring capabilities. Real quick, as usual, per Oracle's request and our own safety, we do have a nice safe harbor. So if you have any one particular harbor you want to think about, this is a safe harbor that you can think about. Basically, typical statements is we are talking about a product that is under development, consistently being released. We'll talk a little bit about that going forward. But obviously, anything I say can and may and probably will change as new features are released. So if you're listening to this recording or if a new release happens shortly after we speak, keep in mind that some of my statements may be incorrect at that point, but they are correct as of this time. A little bit about myself and Compasso. I joined Compasso several years ago, and my focus is on the cloud technologies, in particular the enterprise manager and management cloud technologies for IT operations management. Compasso has been around since 1995, so that should actually say over 20 years in business. Offices in North and South America, and we are exclusively an Oracle technology shop, and we are a Oracle Platinum partner. So we know Oracle technologies inside and out, and we concentrate on specific areas that highlight our capabilities. We are a one-stop shop. So if you just want to come to us for everything, including licenses that you need, that's fine. If you have existing licenses or are already in the process of buying them from Oracle and you want to contact us as far as implementation, operations, training, we can offer all those pieces as well. In particular, some of the other areas we're going to talk about that we cover and provide a lot of services for many clients. We've already talked about, and we will talk about today, about the management cloud pieces, but also around ERP, especially around Brazil tax localizations. If you have practices or work or offices in Brazil and you have to deal with those taxes, I myself will never complain about American taxes anymore because I've had to see what Brazil tax law is right. Also, the cloud ERP systems and offerings from Oracle. Lots of experience setting up finance and expenses for customers in that world. And of course, lastly is commerce. So if you have an e-commerce platform or you're looking to start up a commerce platform or a commerce offering, whether that be direct to consumer or B2B, we have lots of experience setting up sites using the Oracle Commerce Platform, those technologies that used to be known as ATG and Endeca. Also, the Commerce Cloud offering, which is brand new and very exciting stuff out there for Commerce Cloud, especially if you're looking to spin up very quick sites. We can help you with that as well. So with that brief commercial about us at Compasso covered, let's go ahead and get started. Now, if you joined us for one of the previous overview sessions for OMC, some of these slides may look familiar, but I did want to cover them during each of the technical sessions on each of the tools, just to make sure everybody understands what OMC, the short acronym for Oracle Management Cloud, right? What is the goal and what is the standard behind it? So, a brief and simplified history of IT operations. Many years ago, even before I started my IT career, back in the mainframe days, I like to say that there was a hunt and gather methodology to capturing IT metrics, right? The thinking here is that you had to go get the information, put it all together in a way that allowed you to then display it or analyze it, right, and review it. There were no search engines. There was no Google. There was a lot of command line stuff. PS-EF and grep for whatever it is you're looking for was an all-powerful tool. Microsoft came out with the MOM platform to go ahead and help you gather across the board many things to require a lot of configurations. So it was a very manual and labor-intensive effort to gather metrics or statistics or IT information, right, in order to solve problems. Now, from that very active, very hands-on, we migrated through the use of tools into kind of a farm and report methodology. Now, what is that? These are tools that will go out there, gather a lot of information, aggregate it, right, and display it as reports. Now, very often, the tools that were chosen were specific point of, best-in-class point tools, right? So there was a tool for the database. There was a tool for the middleware. There was a tool for the OSs, right? There was a tool for the hardware, for the network, etc. Lots of silos of different tools, gathering a lot of information, aggregating it, and displaying it in kind of somewhat static reports, right? You would see these reports, maybe the dashboards or the operational dashboards that were out there, but they were not very dynamic, right? They would update every once in a while, and if you wanted to drill down into something, well, you probably ended up going back into the hunt and gather methodology after a couple of drill downs, right? Maybe you saw the CPU as a whole for a machine, but if you really wanted to see the detail of what was running, you had to go into that machine and see it. And of course, visibility into the JVMs or individual sessions and traffics just wasn't there. Again, we're looking kind of back in time. Also, it was a lot of open source tools, right? And even the out-of-the-box tools required a lot of customization because everybody had very different systems, very different ways of looking at metrics. So you had some very high maintenance tools that required very specific knowledge in order to be able to deliver, right, the information you needed. So thus, we went from hunt and gather, right, go find the information, put it together in one place and look at it at a point in time, to a farming method where we had tools that would go out and pull all this information, aggregate it, and display it kind of at a high level, right? Now, we've been looking at these tools over the past few years where we're moving these operational type of services to the cloud. So performance monitoring, log analytics, service desk, right? CMDB, all this stuff out there that different tools, different vendors now provided on the cloud. Benefits here, of course, is that there are more features. Somebody's devoted to creating all these features, and you can still get your best-in-class stuff. The way they're gathering the information, you're able to drill down deeper and see more. And you are now offloading, right? When you move it into the cloud, you're offloading the operational cost of operational tools, right? In-house tools like ERP systems, commerce systems, things like that, logistical systems, HCM systems. All those tools have operational costs. You have an IT department that helps support the business or help support these tools or the software so that the business can use it. But operational teams are also going to need some tools in order to manage their IT. So now you've moved that into the cloud, so you no longer have hardware or patches you need to worry about. Somebody else is worrying about that. But these tools are still kind of standalone, right? They're siloed, except now instead of you managing the silos and you being IT, now somebody else is managing the silos, but the interconnectivity, the sharing of information across these tools, not all there. right? So as you look at the demands of IT going forward, right, and the fact that IT is being asked to do more, right, and deliver faster, can they do that? Is it a good use of time if you are spending 30, 40, 50% of your time managing IT tools and only 50% of your resource of your complete IT, resource capital um, actually delivering IT services to the business? So this is where we have these new IT demands for IT tools versus the older monolithic kind of IT tools, where you have the need where in the old monolithic IT ops monitoring system, you have the hardware for your IT operations software, you have the software itself, you're applying updates, you're managing, you're administrating, you're doing it all. Whenever there's a release, you have to release it, and you're possibly impacting the monitoring of your entire IT set. Whereas the newer IT demands, right, are we want newer tools and we want the best features for monitoring and for identifying and doing root cause analysis as fast as possible. And if that means that we have to do an update every month, then we're going to do an update every month. And you can see here, right, the challenge that if you are already bogged down with deploying your own business's IT needs, how are you going to support the deployment of your operational tools? And so moving to the cloud gives you that ability, right? Because you are offloading that management of the tool to somebody else and just getting the benefits of the tool, right? So that is the goal of Oracle Management Cloud. It is to provide all that infrastructure, all those features, all those services for IT management monitoring and providing best-in-class monitoring of your user experience, of your underlying systems, of providing long-term analytical capabilities, log management and search capabilities, all this stuff in a unified management cloud, so that everything goes to one place. It's easily manageable. It's easy to scale, right? Things and all those other things that would properly be supported by your team if you had an unlimited budget, which we don't. So, how does this all work? We're going to talk about in detail, but in general, right, there's a framework, right, set of software and such or tools that allow you to gather your machine generated data, CPU, network connectivity, calls, the log data, things like that, and customer generated data, right? Things that are generated at the time that customers impact your site, right? So whenever there's a new transaction, a new page loaded going out to a customer's browser, that's customer generated data, right? It's coming from your IT systems, but it's being generated because a customer, right, or a business user is using your system. So what you're doing here is basically taking all that information, feeding it up, right, into the management cloud continuously, going through a secure gateway. We'll talk about those a little bit in a second. Going through secure gateways, securely being transferred up into the cloud, where the management cloud systems, right, your systems in this case, not your on-site systems, but your management cloud up managed by Oracle, is doing the monitoring, identifying anomalies and alerting you to them, right? Providing real-time insight, so ability to go and search through all this data, make it usable, make it addressable. Providing machine learning, right? Machine learning being that it will go and find interesting and new features for you, or interesting and new things that maybe are errors or things that you should know about. High CPU loads, high garbage collection, things like that, right? Now, the management cloud, consists of three, currently, more to come in the future, but currently three specific offerings: application performance monitoring, log analytics, and IT analytics, right? Now, for this session, we're going to be diving into the applications performance monitoring cloud. And this is all about end user monitoring, integration into the log analytics. So we will cover log analytics in a future place. I'll briefly click on a link and show you, hey, here's log analytics, but we will look at it in more detail in the next session later today. But all that, right, with the ability to go and look at these application topologies as well. So we'll look at that. Now, APM, right? What does it do? What does it give me? What is it there? It is a very deep monitoring capability for the user experience. All right. This is going to go out and basically integrate into where your applications are running, whether that be WebLogic, and very recently, actually, just as of this month, Tomcat as well. As I mentioned, there's a very aggressive release cycle for new features and new support by Oracle for OMC. So as I was looking and preparing for this session, I looked at documentation and realized it was dated in March, and they had released the support for Apache Tomcat's applications that were running on Apache Tomcat. What these applications do, right, is they're either providing services, right? So when you have your mobile devices, a lot of whether your Apple phone or your Samsung or Android device, if they are running applications and they will be connecting to services, you will have application servers behind the scenes waiting for those service calls from those applications. Some mobile applications aren't really applications at all. All they do is you launch them and they actually connect to HTML5 pages that display specific to that particular device that you're running. So the app launches, and really what it is kind of a very trimmed down browser. It doesn't let you actually put in URLs. In fact, it only connects to the application, and all of the presentation layer of that application is being provided by your systems, right? So whether it's just an application that makes calls back to your application servers and they provide information back, or whether it's just a tap on an icon that realistically all it's doing is launching a browser and the entire UI is being offered up by your application and web servers, it's critical that you understand the performance of those, right? If you're in B2B, if you're in B2C, if you are offering services, right, directly to your consumer, right, whether that consumer be a business or an actual retail consumer, me at home shopping on Amazon, you need to make sure those services are monitored correctly and responding quickly. Because if you don't, there's another app, there's another website, there's another vendor that will fulfill that need. And of course, we live in a need of immediate satisfaction, right? We live in a world of immediate satisfaction. If I can't get a response or order what I want right now, I will go to someone else, right? If Uber is too busy, I will go to Lyft, right? If Amazon is too busy for my electronics, maybe I'll go to bestbuy.com, right? So lots of different things I could do, right, and get that. So you want to make sure you're monitoring correctly. Monitoring just the web page nowadays isn't enough, right? A lot of very advanced web pages use AJAX calls, right? AJAX is a technology, right, an offshoot of Java, right, that allows you to use Java and XML to go ahead and do dynamic web pages, right, without actually going to another page. What does that mean? Sometimes you click on a hyperlink, right, and you're actually going to a page that loads. And while you're on that page, let's say you want to zoom in on a picture or click through to another, click on that little turn dial to look at different angles or different pictures of the same product. A lot of these are AJAX pages, AJAX calls. So the page loads, but that page is still making continuous connections back to the server. You want to track those continuous connections. Those continuous connections could be, an action to look at a new image, an action to add something to a cart, an action to check out something through single click checkout, right? All these things are happening, and one page was loaded, but a lot of calls were made behind the scenes. So APM from Oracle Management Cloud allows it to track all these different pieces, right? It's going to correlate the different server calls, the server requests, the pages all together. It's going to know which servers they were going to. It's going to allow you to drill down into a lot of different information so that you can have a single source of truth, right? You're not going to look at 2 or 3 different tools, the web server metrics, the application server metrics, the JVM server metrics, the database calls, right? All of it is going to be in one place. Now, when I talk about APM, you're always going to see things pop up with reference to logs. I really consider APM, Application Performance Management, and log analytics to be almost a necessary tandem, right? I have yet to run into a situation where I don't think that someone should have log analytics if they're looking at APM. Vice versa may not necessarily be the case, depends on what's going on. But right, the goal is there that you can trace down from that initial page call, right, or server request through to the data that you have on the hardcore metrics like JVM heap size, CPU usage, SQL call times, things like that, and then drill down into the logs, right? So once you identify and narrow down the area that you think might be a problem, going ahead and looking at logs, because logs provide an even deeper and richer capability. And you're probably saying, well, why couldn't I do that myself? You probably could, right? We've been doing this since the hunt and gather methods. The point is that this kind of integration allows you to drill through all these layers, the end user call, the server requests from those calls, the database queries down to the logs, with a couple of clicks in a matter of minutes, right? Or seconds, more likely, rather than going through this process of gathering all the logs, moving them all to one place, running a couple of various search, command line search string commands. Instead, you're using a more rich, user-friendly UI where more people have the ability to go look through this data. Okay, and we'll talk about security. I know I said more people have the ability to look through this data. We'll talk a little bit about security as we go through the presentation or demo as well. The end all, as I was just alluding to, is that you want to reduce the mean time to resolve application issues, right? You want to be able to quickly address when there is a problem and get to that problem as fast as possible so that you can fix it before you lose any more revenue or service orders than you possibly can handle, right? The tool is continuously monitoring, right? If your application goes down, if you have a problem with your infrastructure or your data center, then it can still keep monitoring because it's serviced out on the cloud. It will alert you to issues. It's looking from the outside in. So if you have a monitoring tool that's connecting and suddenly you lose your external network connection, yeah, you probably have a networking tool that's going to address that. But this will also address you as well and tell you that that's an issue as well. You can also create interesting and unique logs monitoring capabilities, which we'll look at later, to integrate into your performance metrics, right? So by using the analytical capabilities and the machine learning capabilities, you can actually pull business relevant data right out of your IT metrics, right? And we'll look at that as well a little bit later. So how does all this work, right? There's a lot of detail. We've talked about servlets. We've talked about server calls. We've talked about web page calls, individual users, the ability to go look at how users are seeing the pages. How does it work, all that? The tool works by deploying, or you would deploy, right, as needed, these APM Java agents, right? That actually gather the data. Now, each of these agents has to be deployed inside either your standalone server that you're monitoring, your managed server and or admin servers, etc. Right? Each one has one. So if you're looking at, for example, a WebLogic domain that consists of an admin server that's managing all the managed servers, right, and keeping an eye on we'll call that mom, right, or or dad, for as whatever the case may be, out there monitoring these servers. And then you have your individual managed servers, right? They could be on one actual physical server, they could be on multiple physical servers or VMs, whatever the case may be. Each one gets an APM agent. This APM agent is what actually sits there and measures and gathers the metrics relevant to each service call, each servlets, JDBC calls, things like that. Now, just to get it out of the way, one of the common questions is what is supported? Well, your application needs to be running on either WebLogic 12.1.3, 12.1.2, or WebLogic 10.3.6, which has two names. It's also known as WebLogic 11G Release 1, as that's not confusing, of course. So any one of those versions of WebLogic server, or as I said, most recently Apache Tomcat 7, 8, or Tomcat EE. So any of these versions can be supported and monitored. There will be more releases, right, and more support for additional application servers in the near future. I do not have a timeline, obviously, from Oracle, but if you can imagine that this product was announced in January, and we're in March, and they just released support for an additional application server. They're doing a lot of development, and they're releasing it very fast. That I have been spoken to about some, or have spoken to some folks about the release schedule. It is very aggressive. And my recommendation, if you don't see an application server that's supported, you definitely let me or Oracle know, because basically it just adds as another vote for the next application server or web server or Java container that's going to be supported. Okay, but there is a long list of planned support. The timeline is, of course, to be determined. So, where did we leave off? Okay, deploying these APM agents. These APM agents, right, basically connect through a gateway that you run locally. This gateway handles that secure path connection back to the Oracle Management Cloud. So nothing gets sent in the clear, right, from your data center or from where your applications live, whether that be on your data center or maybe off on Amazon Cloud or Oracle's own cloud, right? Nothing travels in the clear. These APM agents speak to a local gateway, right? And then they send all that information via a secured token authenticated connection back to the Oracle Management Cloud. Okay. So I'm going to switch over. If you want to take this moment and type up a couple of questions, feel free. I'm going to take this moment to switch over to my demo environment, and then we'll go and look in depth at some of these capabilities of APM. All right. So you should be seeing my. Let me make one screen smaller here. You can't see me do this because it's on my other screen, but it lets me see a couple things, namely my login. So this is my user login, and this is your login to the Oracle Cloud. Right? When you get an account, you will be able to manage which users have access. You'll get an identity domain that you'll use as your identity domain to be able to log in. And meanwhile, let me type all this in. Oh, that's not good. Let's try this again. Let's make sure I didn't mess up the password. All right. We will try this one more time. There we go. Just had a bit of a timeout there on the connection and had to refresh it. So this is the Management Cloud homepage, right? Here's where you get to a variety of different tools, namely the three main offerings being your application performance, your log analytics, your IT analytics. You can also build dashboards. Now, the interesting about dashboards is that it allows you to build custom widgets from any, right? These widgets can source their information from any one of the three current offerings, right? What that means is you can have a dashboard. For example, if I click into this and I go look at one of the already pre-built dashboards, right? The rideshare application. This actually pulls data from logs, from metrics, etc. Right? So we have a listing of log entries by region. We have an ability to drill into entries from here and an ability to understand drive. So you're able to look at a bunch of different information sourced from different metrics, right? So that's the important thing to remember about dashboards is they can go from different metrics. Also, you can make it, they're very static, right? So you're able to let me rephrase that. They are dynamic in that they refresh based on the time and when you look at them from current data, right? But they are also they can be configured to be a certain amount of time and be more of an operational view of the dashboard. Okay, sorry, of the data. But what we want to do is we're actually going to drill down, or sorry, go into um, our APM area and take a look at that. So APM, this is the application performance, excuse me, performance monitoring. And this is the landing page for APM. So when you look at the landing page for APM, it's going to be information on everything that you are monitoring, right? Now, this is pretty common across all the tools. This button here will take you back to the Management Cloud dashboard. Actually, it will give you a drop down to get back to the dashboard or to any one of the other tools, right, which we're not going to. Your user that you're logged into is displayed here. If you're an administrator, you're able to go do a couple different things here later on. I am not an admin. This is a demo environment. They don't give me that kind of level of access. Below that, you have your filters, right? And this is your time filter where you can decide what period of time you want to be looking at. So right now it's got a kind of a customized version for just the past 12 hours or 24 hours, right? Yesterday to today. But we're going to leave that as is. Then you've got your main areas of the home page for APM. You have your geography view. Right? In the geography view, you can define whether you want to look at this based on average response time. Now remember, we are looking at all applications here. We'll show you how to look at specific applications in a little bit. Maximum response time. So that is the max. So if you have 2,000 users and they're averaging, in this case, we're looking at average right now. They're averaging, about pretty dark, so pretty long load times right now of 700 to 800 milliseconds. It's less than a second, but it's actually kind of long for some applications, right? Still sub-second performance though. So, but what happens with maximum? If any one of those 2,000, 3,000, 20,000, 30,000 users have like this ridiculous spike up to 40, 50 seconds, you're going to see that, right? So it's very different. So now when you look at maximum response times, now you're seeing that we're looking at that 2.7, 3.66. We're higher. We're in the seconds range instead of the milliseconds range, several seconds, right? Which is almost where you really want to start worrying about performance issues, right? Or maybe you do, depending on your application. But just a very important difference there between average and maximum, right? The maximum is whatever one time happens, that's what it's going to be. A lot of customers like to look at either average response time or just from a perspective of load and traffic, where are the total views coming from, right? What are my hottest spots, right? And you can almost, depending on some customers, and you can almost just kind of see it follow the sun, right? As we turn and you see the load coming from different continents where you're just hitting the right time and place, right? And of course, you have your errors and percentage of errors. Now, these are not as useful, honestly. Maybe error percentage. We don't have anybody 100%. Again, because we're at the homepage and we're looking at everything we're monitoring. Now, below it, we see the number, our pages. Now, we're only monitoring really one application, which is this ride share application, where you are able to see the different pages that are being offered up, right? We'll see these in more detail in a second. The server requests being made by these pages or maybe any other services that are coming in. So you see we have 4 pages that are really part of this application, but 36 server requests. These pages use a lot of AJAX calls, right? In order to make them dynamic. So they're very interactive. You're not waiting for an entire page to load. You click on a button and something instantaneously happens right there on the screen. So very much like a desktop application. You do that by doing all of these service calls. And everything is running on one application server. So we just happen to be looking at the one application server here. So it is a way of having a holistic view. Now, I did save, in my opinion, the best for last, which is this server requests by app server. This is a heat map, zone map, right? That you can define however you need or prefer in order to really understand what's going on with the application or on the app server. So as we look at our app server, we only have one, so this is the only one that you see. If we had multiple app servers, there would be a second box, right, with a different app server listed on it. So these are all the server requests that are coming to this app server. And I can impact the size or the coloration to do different things, much like I could choose different drop downs here to affect which areas are getting the darker colors. I can do box size by total number of calls, right? Which is a good one. I do like to do that because it easily tells me which is the busiest server request on this server. So when I'm looking at this server, I know that this get is by far the call that gets the server request that gets called on it the most. I also look at it by average response time. So this one gets called the most, but checkout is the slowest, right? As a comparison of all these, and I can highlight and look at that. Now, off the cuff, looking at this makes no sense, right? It could be important. We don't know yet, right? The important thing to understand is that as you become normalized to this presentation and you've chosen your standard one, when you put this onto an operational view, if you are expecting everything to be sub-second, right, and you want to say, oh, this one's really, really hot, it's easy to focus in on what's important, right? What's out of the ordinary. You will become familiar with a certain pattern that you will see in this. And when it's not that pattern, you will step in and go, let me go look at this in particular. And again, that pattern can be done a variety of different ways. We could invert this. We could say, make this, maybe show me any that has a lot of errors, right? And as you can see, this pretty much takes up the whole thing because it's got a lot of errors. And then the second one might be total number of calls. So the color changes. So basically what this is telling us is when it comes to errors, right, checkout is by far the one that's having the most issues. So remember that because we're going to look at that in just a second. Now, once we get out of the home page, you've got a couple of different ways to look at it. You've got a list of all the served pages, right? So if you had more than 4, here we're showing the top 5, but if we had more than 5, this is where you would go to look at all those and sort them and look at them through a different number of ways, right? You'd be able to look at them in a couple different number of ways, right? Server request list, again, pages or service calls are going to generate server requests, and then your app servers. But the normal way of doing things is if you're going to be using this tool, you're probably, unfortunately, going to get some alerts. And this is going to be the first page you're going to go to, which is the alerts page. So as you drill down into the alerts, you have a long list of alerts, right, that have been going on. Alerts will launch up, right, and they will fire off a call to you, whether that be a mobile, right? Maybe they'll send you an alert on your phone, on your mobile device, or the email. I believe emails alerts or the alerts will be coming out very, very soon. I have to go back and look at documentation, whether or not those email pieces, the email integration piece was going to be available soon or out already. But, it's going to tell you how long has this specific alert been going. In this particular alert, right, it's that you've defined these alerts, and this one happens to say that there's been an average response time, right, over the last hour of greater than something, right? So this particular alert says you gave it a threshold of something has to happen over a period of time, an hour, okay? That something has to be a average response time greater than 20 milliseconds. Well, for the last hour, we've been at an average of 1900 milliseconds. That's significantly greater than. And this has been going on for the last 12 minutes and 13 seconds, right? The last time that it was looked at was 2 minutes ago. So this is all very important and relevant information because it's telling you if you just received an alert, how long has this issue been going on, right? Maybe your phone's, we have it on silent mode, and you were watching a movie and you went to check your stuff and you're like, oh my gosh. You quickly can go start looking at all these rules and information. Your rules can be defined right here. If I wanted to add a new rule, right, you go through here, you give it a name, you tell it the metric you're looking at, right, the comparison operator, warning threshold, critical threshold, right? So you can define the difference between a warning, right, something that you should be aware of versus things are starting to go downhill fast, get here, right? And oh, good, yeah, there's our email where you set up your email address to set up alerts, okay? So let's go back to our alerts. Oops. And so if I'm looking at one of these alerts, right, I can click and go directly to, right, what is causing the alert, right? So in this case, it's a server request. And it's an AJAX call. And as I look at the call, I look at this metrics collected over a period of time. Now, the search field is automatically going to narrow me down to the past hour, right? The frame of reference that that alert was configured for. And as we look at this, right, and we see a disappearance of monitoring. That's probably normal maintenance on the demo environment. But as we look at through this, actually, it's probably specific to the activity that we're generating or that Oracle is generating on this environment to create this issue. You see, right, in this case, the average response time, but then that is in reference to, right, each call. Right? We see the average response breakdown, which tells us how much time is spent processing that response, and how much of that time is actually sending the response. Right. So what does that mean? That's the difference between receiving it, the server working within the application to figure out what to send, and then actually sending it back. So you're actually able to figure out how much time is spent by the server doing the work of the request versus sending that information back, right? And you can see that right here. You can also see a big difference here in the differences, right? We go through an average response time of like 5 seconds. A max response time of 5 seconds, where our average is 2.89. That's a pretty significant difference when you're talking about a consumer application, right? Something that's 2 seconds. That's all it takes for someone to hit the home button, right, and go launch another app and go try and look there to see if they can get what they want. We're literally dealing in just a handful of seconds here to maintain the interest, the attention, and in many cases the wallet, right, of that particular user. The number of average response times per second here, and then of course the last one is calls versus errors, right? So of all the calls that came in, what were the successful number of calls and how many of those were errors, right? So as you look through this, you're already realizing that we're collecting a lot of different metrics, right, from different pieces of information, and we're able to scan these along within relation to each other, right? So we see the response time going down, and as it goes up, and we look at the peak response times, they are aligning with times where there's a lot of work, right, going in. But I also noticed that one of my peak times, most of my peak times, if you look at the bottom row as I go and scan over to the peak times, happen to be correlating, right, with the most errors per call, right? So there's a lot going on here that I can quickly tell. Some of these errors might be the reason for my problems, right? I can look at the geography for these calls, where they're coming from. All right, maybe it's a regional issue. Right, as I look down and I look at a particular region, maybe I know suddenly I can look in and go, oh well, we lost a. I look at the news and somebody cut a fiber cable, right, between Asia Pac and the U.S. So there we go. We just identified a possible issue for the performance issues, right? Maybe I can identify specific differences between browsers, right, or OS devices. So you'll be able to identify if possibly, hey, all of my really long performance times are on a particular browser. Maybe I need to go get development to drill down and find out, does that browser have a particular issue with our code that's causing it to run longer, right? Or maybe an OS issue, right? Are Apple devices, iOS devices, running faster and or slower than Android devices? I need to go look at my app on each device and find out if there's an issue there. Right? So lots of things you can look at. And of course, you can look at the server request again via topology, right? And because I can drill down into the actual app server that was hosting those calls or responding to those calls. And I can drill down further into that app server, right? And now, instead of looking at metrics from an AJAX call, we're looking at that application server during those points of times, right? And this is giving us, again, significant information. We're looking at app servers. So the key metric for app servers, 9 times out of 10, is going to be average use, right? Average heap size used. But we can drill down and we can see the maximum heap size, right, that is available, right? We see our committed heap size, right? How much is actually currently allocated to the JVM, not the maximum allowed to be allocated, but the currently allocated. And then we see the actual used, right, or average, right, between a period of time. Below that, right, we can also track our garbage collection. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Java areas, when it comes to JVM issues, right, and high CPU load or memory issues, garbage collection is one of the first things you're going to look at. Garbage collection is the action of Java cleaning up the JVM, right, and releasing memory that isn't needed anymore, right, by different objects, different static calls or dynamic variables or things like that. Basically, it's doing cleanup and releasing memory back out. When you see applications running on a JVM and that memory starts creeping up really close to memory heaps usage, Java becomes very aggressive about garbage collection. Now, that's good because you kind of want Java to clean up after itself, right, when it's running all its applications. It's bad because garbage collection requires CPU time. And so if you are running at a particular event, right, and you want to make sure that you're properly performing things, you're going to need to understand if I'm running low on memory or JVM memory, do I need to expand my heap size because my average usage is now going to be close to my max, so maybe I bump up my max memory, right? I don't necessarily need that extra memory, but Java isn't going to be so aggressively collecting that memory because it's got a little bit more room to grow. Right now, we're seeing some very steady and useful and smart time being spent on garbage collection, right? Because it doesn't need it. It's not close to its thresholds of max. Whereas in other times, you could see the CPU suddenly spike up very, very high during a lot of garbage collection, and that can impact your performance for your users. Okay, so that is a typical drill down process. Now, once you get to this level, right? Once you've gone in there and you've identified that you've seen issues, you've identified the issues, you've drilled down and said, okay, well, maybe this is garbage collection related, or I know that it's happening on this app server because this is the app server that these AJAX call was being serviced by, right? We started in alerts. We looked at the AJAX call. We saw the errors. We drilled down into a particular server that was supporting that AJAX call. Now we're looking at metrics here. All seems to look good. So what's next step? Well, that would be when we drill down into viewing our logs, right? And so just to kind of close the loop here, we're not going to spend any time here, but this is that relationship where now we've correlated now all the log entries, right, for the time period that we were looking at metrics, and we can look through here and identify any issues, right, that we are getting. And right off the bat, we've already added some fields, right, some filters to look at the warnings and the errors that are happening at the same time as what's going on this server, right? So we're looking at the rideshare server that we looked at. And here we jump from APM into log analytics, okay? So that's just a quick path or drive through APM, right? So what we looked at? We looked at alerts, right? We looked at your APM homepage, the normal workflow, which is typical workflow for a user of APM, which is I got an alert. Let me go look at that alert. Let me see what's going on, right? Understand what that alert is. I get the details of what was going on, right? I drill down into the cause of that alert or the source of that alert, which happens to be a AJAX call, which is my checkout AJAX call. Right? I looked and understood what was going on. I saw that there were errors going on. I saw my peaks and my response times. Right? As I looked through it, I reviewed the geographic heat map to make sure I understood what was going on. Maybe I can even go look at where the most errors. Well, the errors are pretty distributed. And I can look at whether they're focused on any particular browsers, right, or OS or types of devices, right? So I can understand who is being impacted, right? And then, of course, I can go into the server request itself. Here's that checkout AJAX call, and I can read and understand, again, look, the review we saw in the details in the metrics page, But from this server request view, I can drill into the actual app server that was hosting those calls, right? And then, of course, review those metrics and information over time, period of time, see if there's garbage collection issues, heap size performance issues, CPU issues where we might be having issues addressing or providing enough CPU. Maybe we're hitting our CPU. Is there a roadblock here? And once we get to this point, and we're on the correct app server with correlation and with time correlation, we're going and diving into the logs. Okay. So, you can change that workflow. So wherever you want, you can start by looking at your list of pages, right? And I can go to any of those pages and, maybe my takeout page. Now I'm looking at that page view, all the page load times, the number of page views. I can see, again, the checkout calls, right? Or the calls that were coming from that page. Or even drill out, the server requests, which server was hosting that particular page. You can start from the server requests, right? I can look at all the server requests regardless of page. So these are all the different server requests that are coming in, whether they're select SQL statement, SQL statements select requests, JDBC server requests, direct app server requests. They're all there. You can drill down to any of these and start from that level, or you can just look at it from an app server perspective. And here we only have one app server, right? You can also filter. So if we had a whole host, right, of app servers we were monitoring, multiple applications, you could create a filter, right, to view only specific app servers that were of importance to your role, right? So I have a particular server names that I want to worry about. Those are the ones that I'll go look at, or a particular type of app server, whatever that contains. I can put in filters and narrow that down. Most useful on app servers, depending on how many you're monitoring, that may or may not be needed, especially if you're on a kind of shared system. But definitely server request or page list, applying that filter is going to help narrow down the noise, so you're focusing on server requests that are specific to your application. Okay. All right. So that's a overview, right? We went a little bit deeper. Last time we only had an hour. If you came to one of our previous sessions, didn't get to dive into the alerts, didn't get to provide a really deep review of the different layers of monitoring that can be done, right? And the integration into the log analytics. I'm going to stop here and open it up to questions. Again, just a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free. You can expand that little section that says questions, and you can type your questions there at the bottom. Click to either, you can send them just to me by clicking send privately, or send to all by clicking send to all, and then I will answer them here. I'm going to pause for just a minute while I read a couple of these, and then we'll address each of these questions as they come in. All right, let's get started. So the first question, what kind of alerting is supported? Well, let's go take a quick look at that. We will jump over here to the alerts page, which is where you would configure your reporting, or your alerts, sorry. And then you click on alert rules, right? And so here's where all your alert rules will be defined. Now you have a couple different ways to organize them, as far as it sorts by name, right? Or the last one was changed, so somebody makes enough that you can reorganize them however you want if you need to. But basically, to add a new alert, you're just going to click on add new alert rule. You'll give it a name. You can choose which metric, whether it's average page response, average AJAX call. New alert rules will be provided or added over time. You can create, now again, let me just add one caveat here. These are alert rules respective to APM. There are other alerting capabilities that will be added respective to log analysis. So in the log world, I'll show you how you can create kind of a report or search for logs that bring up specific log entries. And you can actually create a search for a specific OR error that you want to be aware of, or BA error, web logic error you want to be aware. And you will be able in the future to trigger alerts based on that. That has not been released just yet, but that is one of the things that's coming down the pipeline. But anyways, you set your alert here, whether it's greater than or less than, and you'll define greater than the value you want, greater than the value you want, etc. You set your alert, give your emails, and that's your alert rule. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. More features, more depth, more complex rules will be able to be created within the rule set if you need. Okay. Second question. Um, how is security handled between the agents? Okay, so I'm assuming you mean the Java APM agents. Within the APM agents, again, there is a security key that is generated when you download. So the way you deploy this is you will actually, after you get your account, you will log into your account. You'll go into your management cloud at manage as an admin, which I am not logged in, so I can't show you this. But from that login, then you would go and you have a page where you can go and say you want to add some systems, and you will download your APM agents. At that point, you're going to get basically a zip file. It's going to have your agent, your binaries, right? And then it's also going to have, I forgot, if I always get confused. I think it's a registration key, or it's a key file that basically that'll allow you those APM agents to package up the information and send it via the gateway back to OMC. So all those APM agents are going to funnel information back through the gateway back into the OMC cloud. All right. So there's there's several layers of security there. All the information is very safe. I'll talk a little bit more about additional capabilities, especially in the logs. Right. Really, from a metrics perspective, there's very little information here that could be considered a security issue. You're really looking at some very specific machine metrics. Really, in the logs places where a lot of people have more concerns, because logs can carry a lot more information. Passwords might be in the clear, usernames might be in the clear. And I'll talk a little bit more about some capabilities specifically around that for log analytics in our next session. Release schedule. I really can't speak to that specifically. I do know that the Oracle Product Management has said that they are targeting a quarterly, if not more aggressive, release schedule for new features, so that they can those new features will be features of capabilities of the actual APM or IT or the analytics tool or log analytics tool, right? Features of the actual products, as well as additional support for more technologies. So initially, it was just Oracle WebLogic, right, and Oracle Database. We just saw in March the release of a new release of OMC that now added support for Tomcat. And I expect as we progress through the year, we will see additional support for more app server and database technologies, right? So, off the top of my head, I would be surprised if we didn't see some sort of support for one of the other majorly used databases or application servers over the course of the next year or so. But again, that's totally up to Oracle to decide. All right, I don't see any other questions. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today. This concludes the portion of today's virtual tech day on application performance monitoring. If you'd like to follow up with us, please feel free. You'll be getting an email with the slides in the next few days. And please feel free to respond back to us if you'd like to have a more one-on-one conversation regarding these tools, implementation capabilities, or just purchasing them. We'd be glad to help. Thank you very much and have a great day.